I have lived in Iver for nearly 80 years and have watched it change from the peaceful rural village of my childhood into the noisy, bustling place it is today. The traffic is constant. You take your life into your hands when crossing the road. My cousin Reg Foster has come with me to look at my cottages in Swan Road. There used to be a row of 10 cottages, but 8 were demolished to make way for a car park. This is how the cottages looked at the turn of the century. The 2 remaining cottages belong to me, but now I have sold them to a builder who is updating them. I was born at number 1 in 1911 and my mother was born next door, number 2, in the year 1882. The builder is keeping the old range. I am pleased about this. The old range has happy memories for me. I used to sit here on winter evenings with my mother and father. I would imagine this is how the room could have looked when I was an infant. Now it's all been changed. Walls pulled down and new brick archways and doors. What a transformation. It all looks so different now from the days when my grandmother lived here, number 2. She would not recognise this room now. In her day, money was earned the hard way. New furniture and expensive trimmings were a rare luxury. The kitchen is now completely modern, straight from ideal homes, not the humble scullery my grandmother knew. She would consider this to be a little palace. Around the fireplace in those winter days, clothes would be drying. The builder has not changed the outside except for the window boxes, and it pleases me to know that my cottages will stand here for some more years. On my way to school I would walk past the Swan, up the High Street, where today the car has taken over. When I was a boy it was carts and horses, the car rarely seen. The church tower looks down Iver High Street and remains constant on the landscape, in spite of the changes since this picture was taken in the 1920s. New cottages and modern flats have replaced the old bakery and telephone exchange, which once stood on the left of the High Street. New shops and a garage stand on the site of the old village hall, which has now been pulled down. The new village hall stands near West Square, become the meeting place for all the village groups. Princess Alexandra officially opened the new hall in July 1980. There's also a new Baptist church standing near the site of the old one, known by my grandmother as Mark's Chapel. This is where the old post office used to be, and Mr. Fox had his grocer's shop. Tom Hazelgrove, an established and much respected Iver resident, sits with me on the village bench chatting about the old days and bemoaning the heavy traffic which constantly uses Bangors Road South, in spite of the traffic signs. There used to be a pub round the bend called the George in the last century, and it was a quiet country lane in those days. Not far from where the old pub was stands Grove House. Colonel Patterson lived here at one time. He was known to be a lion hunter and wrote a book called Man Eater. The road is very narrow, and there is talk of this brick wall will be removed to make it wider, which will mean more heavy traffic. It's bad enough now. Tom and I stand marooned on the traffic island in the centre of the junction near West Square, which used to be like this. The entrance to Iver House has changed hardly at all, and a traffic-free Sunday morning reminds me of how it used to be. The garden of Iver House is protected from the noise by a high brick wall, a feature of many old Iver houses, and this gives some peace when sitting in the garden on summer days. Down the drive and beyond the gates, the view years ago would have been of the Garibaldi pub, the blacksmith and his forge in Blacksmith Lane. And on the opposite side of the road stand some of the original cottages, updated now with new doors and windows. Mr. Fox the grocer lived in this elegant village house. And a little further up, Iver Lodge, another old residence with a large walled garden, now under threat of redevelopment. Next to that, the Yews, where I remember the recorder Mr. Robinson lived. Kingsway was known as King's Yard in my boyhood, and I used to come here to visit my paternal grandmother. This attractive old house with its unusual roof and iron balcony directly overlooked a row of cottages called West End Cottages, where grandmother lived. They've now been replaced by a row of modern terraced houses. The loss of the old ones is very sad when you realise these attractive old cottages are directly opposite. The old with the new. Opposite Kingsway is Grange Farmhouse. The farmland is now the site of the new village hall. The house is a private residence. Little Copthall, part of a large house known as Copthall. It was divided many years ago. This too has a high brick wall around a large garden. Where, in the hurricane of 1987, a magnificent balsam poplar was brought down, leaving a gap in a screen of trees. Some of the older, smaller houses still remain, such as this one standing on the corner of Cecil Road, aptly named after the great Cecil Rhodes, founder of Rhodesia, which is now being renamed Zimbabwe. One of my school chums lived in this road, and he was unfortunately crippled and spent his life in a bath chair. We took turns to wheel him to school each day. Buck House is part of the Lees, and the cottages beside it used to house farm workers. My cousin Reg Foster was born at number 3. The remaining farmland of the Leeds has been redeveloped into a large housing estate. A little further up from Buck House is an interesting row of terrace cottages built in 1896, many occupied in my earlier days by brickworkers who worked in the nearby brickfields, another Iver industry. This is where much of my childhood was spent. The school was built in 1897 and replaced the old boys' school in Sawney Lane. The building later became the village police station and has now sadly been pulled down. This bricked up doorway was the girls' entrance. Their school was also in Sawney Lane next to the church. Now the school is mixed and boys and girls use the same entrance. In 1977 the bell was removed by the headmaster and sent to a scrapyard. This was Jubilee year and the villagers were furious because they wanted to ring the bell for this purpose. It was recovered just in time for the great occasion, and Mr. Stanley, captain of the bells, Tom Hazelgrove and myself rang out proudly to mark the great day. The headmaster's house was occupied in my school days by Mr. Stone, a strict but kindly man. Here our family doctor lived. It's now a private nursing home. York Cottage played a part in the education of the young Duke of Kent. It was a private nursery school. Opposite York Cottage stands a new dwelling on the site of the old cottage hospital. A charming building pulled down long ago. Hospitals have a habit of disappearing in Iver. For example, this is the site of a hospital built as recently as the 1930s and opened by Duke of Kent in July 1937. The Kents were established residents of Iver and lived at Coppins in Bangors Road South. It is screened by trees, but this earlier picture shows the charm of the house. Princess Victoria once lived here. The Ward Memorial Homes are a well-known Iver landmark. They have recently been re-roofed, but a little change from years ago as this old print shows. Behind the Ward Memorial Homes runs a public footpath to Love Green, which can also be approached down Love Lane, passing the old stable block now converted into cottages. This area has a feeling of the past. Love Green is now enclosed with railings. It was an open area when I was born. Love Green House overlooks the green. Past here would come the dairy cart stocked with milk churns from Sparrow's farm on their way to deliver milk to the villagers. The proud owner of the dairy was George Sparrow. 'Tis still a rural scene today, complete with tethered pony on the green. Here, walking along the lane towards Sparrow's farm, I can hardly believe that time hasn't stood still. There is a sense of rural peace, but for how long? This lovely Grade 2 listed farmhouse has been allowed to become derelict. The fields surrounding it are a developer's dream. What will happen here? Will this area be completely lost under concrete, like Grange Farm and the Lees estate? Footpath 13 crosses the fields to the Ward Memorial Homes. Much courting was done here years ago by local lads and lasses. Back in the lane, I look into the village pond, barely a large puddle now. I used to feed the ducks and geese. Now they are all to be found at Little Britain, an artificial lake reclaimed from the gravel extraction which took place here. Before that I remember it as open fields. This area of Buckinghamshire is rich with gravel deposits, and Iver is under constant threat from gravel extraction. Swans have played a large part in Iver's history too, and they are an emblem on the county badge of Buckinghamshire. The cool, clear waters of the ford, which marks one of the county boundary lines between Bucks and Middlesex. I have such happy memories of this place, and many pleasant hours I have spent here as a child. The footbridge was once made of wood and was carved with many initials. Lovers still come here to do their courting. It is possible to imagine you are miles away from traffic and industry. The ford is not deep, and years ago I remember my mother telling me about a Johnny Hall, a village eccentric, who always carried a Bible with him and took great delight in ferrying the boys across the ford in his horse and cart, stopping halfway and making them get out and walk. He was also famous for rolling a barrel of tar on fire down Iver High Street on hearing of the relief of Mafeking during the Boer War. Down the years, children have paddled here during the long summer days, just as they do today. These are pupils from a school in Greenford, taking samples for their biology lesson. I make my way down Ford Lane to the other county boundary in Iver Lane. This is Clisby Bridge over the River Colne, separating South Bucks and Middlesex, Iver from Hillingdon. Where the factories stand now, I can recall an expanse of roads and cottages by the bridge. The area was known as the Tin Pots, and people came here to fish. It's still a favourite spot for anglers. On the wall of the bridge is the City of London coat of arms, marking the point where duty and tax should be paid on the transport of coal and other goods. This is again the marked contrast between 20th century bustle and rural calm. From a busy road to the peace of Huntsmore and Clisby Lodge. Looking back towards Iver, I can remember when Iver Lane was just a quiet road and there were no houses here. Now this area has become part of the Cong Valley Park. A new bridge spans an area of another new road to satisfy the demands of the motor car, overlooked by the church tower and mature trees. The M25 was carved out of some of Iver's loveliest countryside and shattered its peace forever. It's hard to imagine that at the beginning of the century, horse and brake made the journey to Uxbridge. Iver's local carrier was nicknamed Shaker Butler, and he used to take villagers to nearby Uxbridge to do their shopping, picking them up outside the Bull. Now it's all speed and petrol fumes, overlooked by Parliament. Yet this quiet lane, just yards away from the motorway, was the main road to Middlesex. Now it's a footpath, which leads to Bridgefoot and Serenity. The red brick bridge over the River Cong Brook is unchanged by time, giving me a feeling of the old days. Hard to believe that this was the main road to Uxbridge till around 1970. Bridgefoot was built in the early 18th century and is the residence of a well-known Secker publishing family. Adrian Secker chats to me about the many changes his family have witnessed over the decades. He kindly invites me into his lovely garden, surrounded by a high brick wall which protects him from the noise of the nearby M25. The brick wall features an interesting mock door that leads to nowhere, put there to break up the long expanse of wall. The River Cong Brook flows through the middle of the garden and visitors can wander through the trees, letting the gentle flowing water soothe them. Adrian Secker tells me of the literary figures who have visited this house and walked in the garden. Famous names such as D.H. Lawrence and Compton Mackenzie. At one time, Iver cornmeal was here, the remains of which can still be seen. From the little bridge, there is a clear view of the church tower of St. Peter's. The church has many beautiful stained glass windows. The Norman font, with its ornate carved lid, has baptised children through the ages. My mother was baptised here, and so was I. The stairs to the belfry. Reg Foster's family were bell ringers here for many years. The fire hooks by the wall were used to remove burning thatch from cottages many years ago. The east window above the altar. The church has a wooden vaulted ceiling. One remaining carved wooden angel adorns the pulpit, the others were stolen. Above the altar table, a magnificent carved screen. Before the crucifix on these altar steps, my father married my mother on Boxing Day 1910. This is their wedding group, Swan Yard. I was their only child. The Mothers' Union banner represents the mothers of the village. And many of them lost their sons in 2 world wars. On this roll of honour, many men known to me are names. They gave their lives for our future in the War of 1939. The Book of Remembrance lies open at Harry Colesill's name. He was my neighbour and lived at No. 3 Swan Road. A prisoner of war in World War I, he returned home to die at the age of 22 in 1919. Outside in the churchyard on the war memorial, the poppies of Flanders marked the loss of Iver men of both world wars. In the quiet seclusion of the churchyard lie the remains of many Iver families. My mother and father rest here with many of their relatives. This medieval coffin is a famous relic from centuries ago. It stands in the corner of the church wall on the south side. The wall memorial was designed by W.H. Ward, a member of one of Iver's most distinguished families. Opposite the church in Thorney Road South stand some of Iver's most elegant houses. This used to be called Church Road. Colne Cottage. And beyond, two houses built in 1790. As a small boy, I walked this road with my mother. Iver Station did not exist then. This whole area used to be meadows and cornfields. Now it's either been developed or is in the process of development. No Richards Park in those days. Our trips past the Tower Arms were for the purpose of visiting a friend of my grandmother's. Mrs. Slatter lived here in one of these cottages that had lattice windows in those days. The old hay wain stands in the courtyard of the Tower Arms door, a scene from yesterday. Colne Orchard has changed a lot from my childhood. Houses stand where apple and cherry trees used to be. There was a pretty wisteria-clad cottage here for a long time, and it was at the corner where we had a footpath known as the Slip in those days. This area was allotments where my father spent his leisure time and grew our vegetables. Footpath 16 to West Drayton. Now houses have taken over and crocus grow where the cabbage patch was. The Fox and Pheasant is one of Iver's many pubs. The Whip and Collar and the Oddfellows Arms in Swallow Street. Back in the heart of the village, the famous old Swan Inn. And across the road, the Bull. Further up the High Street, past the Checkers, and to the Langley end of Iver, the Gurkha stands, which used to be called the Red Lion. This stands opposite another famous house, Iver Grove. This is how it looked in 1722. Admiral Lord Gambier lived here at one time, and his gardener Thompson developed the wild pansy into the cultivated variety we grow in our gardens today. Wood Lane, Iver Heath. One of the farms of my boyhood still remains and operates as a farm, and this stands opposite the fields where the annual village show and sports day were held. And Iver Unity played football. How much longer, I ask myself, will this remain green fields? So much has changed in the village over the years of my life. Back to where it all began for me nearly 80 years ago. And the landmarks remain constant. The church and the old Swan cottages. Today the members of Iver Countryside Association are going to walk a newly registered footpath number 26 between the Swan and Coppins Lane, which will now show on the definitive map. This lane close to my home is where I played as a boy. Close by is Delaford Park. The gates conceal the new house from us. But this is a former mansion which stood on the site in 1846 and was known as Hill House. A beautiful setting of Needham Lacey, a charming house set in a jewel of a garden. Again, a high brick wall keeps out the noise of the high street just a stone's throw away. Here you feel in the heart of the English countryside. Iver Lodge, back entrance, where a better view of the house is a little further down the lane. Miss Rhodes, the sister Tessa Rose, used to live here, across the fields. Where I used to play with my friends, a new house has been built called Delaford Without. Beyond this point, we will go no further, although a private drive is the continuation of the new path number 26, passes a few private houses. These are surrounded by trees and fields, an open space, which may not remain so for much longer. What can I do to keep Iver green and leave for the future something that will grow with the years and improve the landscape of Iver? I cannot think of anything better than to plant a tree. John Illingdon, seen behind me, is the keeper of the Iver Tree Bank and is responsible for many tree planting sessions around the village. Johnny and Nora. Hi. Stand over here. It gives me a feeling of contentment to plant this sapling, and I hope it will give pleasure to future generations of Iver in the years to come.